Women Making Moves, where we celebrate the moves that women are making. My name is Amy Pons. I'm a Master Certified Life Coach and an energy healer. I'm joined today with Kacy Fleming. Kacy is a self-proclaimed perimenopause whisperer who is devoted to fostering human well-being, especially for women in their peak performance years, which is 35 to 65. She spent over 20 years in biopharmaceuticals, learning the importance of health education and community support, as well as the criticality of creating access to medications. Despite this knowledge, when perimenopause symptoms hit, Kacy fell victim to Google search and knew there had to be a better way to learn about the menopausal transition. That is why she created the Fuschia Tent. In addition to being the CEO and founder of the Fuschia Tent, Kacy is the founder of Kacy Fleming Consulting and is a multiple award-winning well-being strategist and life coach with a master's in organizational psychology and a passion for helping people. She is a published author and TEDx speaker who has appeared on numerous global podcasts talking about workplace well-being and menopause. She has authored articles on hot topics in the workplace ranging from menopause and mid-career transitions to flexible work, humane leadership, and the keys to employee engagement. In addition to talking about all things menopause, she loves to share top tips earned from her 2 decades of experiencing work in a variety of leadership roles. Kacy, welcome.
Thank you so much. Every time I hear that, I feel old. I feel older each time I hear it. There's something else in there.
I don't know that I feel old. I feel it's an interesting feeling when I'll say I'm on my second career. Like I've already had a 20-year career. Like that seems wild to me. Well, my first job was at Dairy Queen at 16 and it was amazing, by the way. If no one's ever done like an ice cream curly Q, it's so fun. Anyway.
I like eating them.
Same. I just had one last night. Fewer things in the summertime, in my opinion, are better than like an amazing ice cream cone.
I mean, I try to go dairy free because of my tummy. It gets upset easy, but I do love a popsicle. Like the popsicle is now like when I was a kid and I would see people eating the popsicles at Dairy Queen, I'd be like, lame. And now I'm like, yeah, popsicles.
Are those you mean the Star Kiss?
So I just eat Johnny Pops. And there is one that I love right now that is a rainbow and it's perfect for 5 months. And I always feel so happy when I am having that popsicle.
Happy Pride and happy Juneteenth.
Yes, it is Juneteenth.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we'll go live after that, but happy Juneteenth to everyone out there. Oh, that's incredible. Kacy, we met for the first time. Was it Valentine's Day? We've known each other before that, but in person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Galentine's in Chicago at Aaron Gallagher's The Fairway. That was our very first face-to-face meeting, and it was a love match.
It was. I was like, Kacy Fleming? What? And it was just, to your point, just like eye to eye, soul to soul. It was amazing.
It is so fun. And it, especially after going so long, like through the COVID period, I know you and I both have health stuff that we're extra careful with. You know, that was such a period of lockdown. And so really this year has been a year of celebration and being able to be in community with people in a way without thinking about all the things that we thought about for so many years, that it feels like a real privilege just to get to be in rooms of women and hug again and without thought and like cheers and cheer each other on. Yeah, that was a really wonderful night.
I agree. So thank you for joining Women Making Moves. I think back then I was like, I want to chat with you. I want to know all the things. As an energy coach, everything is energy. And I now know in my experience, so much was coming up from not just my 20 years of corporate and workplace abuse, but also the first 20 that were founded in different varying types of abuse and experiences. All of that was coming up to the surface to be released. And I'm not suggesting we don't go to doctors and get all of that checked out. Of course we do. And a lot of times the physical ailment is kind of the last stop. We've been feeling it inside for a really long time. So.
Yeah, I mean, burnout for sure has a physical manifestation. And I think that's, even when I was, heading global well-being and we would talk about it, what would get me when it was just seen as like, well, but that just means you're overworking or you're working too much or you're too stressed or you're too this. And, sure, you're burnout, but, just take a vacation or just use this app and, it'll go away. And it's like, well, no, you cannot remove a person from a situation that made them unwell for even a month and then put them back in if the situation doesn't change, the health of the person doesn't change, right? And so I think people forget. I posted a while back about the stages of burnout, because there's even a stage called honeymoon, which is what I would argue that I'm trending at right now, having 2 new businesses, working myself like crazy, but because I'm so excited. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I have the tendency to run myself into the ground. And that is the beginning of burnout. It's just that I've been all the way to the end, like you have, where, suddenly you can't eat and nothing digests, and you're seeing doctor after doctor. Sure, you have something horrible. And really it's this physical manifestation of years of chronic stress. And that's so hard to believe. And it also is a really weird dichotomy, because it feels like you're gaslighting yourself in a way, because as women, especially, we were told, that we're hysterical, right? Like that's the common thing. Like if you ever watch an older show, women are hysterical, and stress and hysteria, though not nearly the same thing, get conflated in this discussion. And so it is true that stress has all these physical manifestations. It's also true that it's not in our head, right? Mm-hmm. Stress is a physiological response that happens all the way throughout the body. And when we start acknowledging that, maybe I'll take burnout a little bit more seriously. I mean, you and I both know, like the posts on LinkedIn, there's always, and it's usually male that posts this, but in a hospital bed, 55 years old, just had a heart attack from the stress of working, looking back on their lives, and they post about it, and you see that, and yet we forget. We just go back to pushing ourselves the same way we did, expecting to feel great, and it's like, nope, that's not going to happen.
Because of the deep-rooted systems that the workplace is rooted in: patriarchy, white supremacy, colonialism, capitalism, and they're crumbling and they're dismantling, and many of us are figuring out how that looks like for us. And there's such a thing as I call it good burnout, meaning I'm doing things that light me up and still not necessarily honoring my boundaries or capacity. And so being almost a year and a half in my business, I've just recently restructured my business to flow with my monthly menstrual cycle. Because I know personally in my latter luteal phase, I don't coach because I'm not a service to myself or others. It's an all introspective week. So how gorgeous that knowledge is. And I just learned that I'm 42. It's interesting that you talk about, and I always hesitate sharing this because, again, I'm not a doctor. Like I am an energy healer. Yes, I work with internal energies, but I'm not healing ailments. One of my current clients, she said, Amy, when I hired you as a life coach, I never would have imagined that my gastrointestinal issues would subside. And I didn't know this. She didn't share this with me until like after they were gone. And I'm kind of glad, because I'd have been like, no, go see a doctor. No, she was like, no, I always saw a doctor and everything was fine. But the work that we do in sacred session together, and the energy movement and the healing, the growth, that has made her feel better.
That's amazing. And I believe it 100%.
So it is fascinating. And, science is catching up. They're like, the metaphysical is something. You get it. I adore you. Kacy, what moves are you excited to be making? Fuschia Tent is up and running. Kacy Fleming Consulting is up and running. Tell us more.
It's been a year. I mean, I'm going to tell you all right now, do not sell your house and start 2 businesses at the same time. I don't know what made me think that was a good idea. That is my one piece of advice this year. So Kacy Fleming Consulting, I kind of have 2 loves, and they're not disconnected. They're very much connected, but the work manifests in 2 different ways, right? So I have a background in organizational psychology. I'm extremely passionate about creating better, more equitable, more well workplaces for people, and helping people feel as good as humanly possible in spaces that maybe are not affirming for them, but that they can't leave at that moment. We have to be realistic, right? Like it's a privilege that I could leave. Not everybody can, right? And so, there's that side of the work, which is very much tailored in the workplace. And then the other side of the work, which is the Fuschia Tent, is really born out of my perimenopause journey. And so you said it in the bio. I put it in there very deliberately because I think it's important. I spent 20 plus years in pharmaceutical companies working every role from sales and communications and training to marketing and market access, which is how we make drugs accessible to patients. And my father was a physician. My uncle's a physician. I grew up in a household where we talked about mental health. We talked about every bodily function known to man, probably to a joking point, right? Like ad nauseum. Like most people are like, what's going on in this house? And yet when perimenopause hit, even though I'd suffered anxiety my entire life and was well aware of it, I ended up past clinically depressed, like to the point where I could not get up off my couch. I was terrifying my spouse. I was terrifying myself. And it wasn't all the time. It was just like I would have these moments of almost catatonia where I had no will to do anything. And I went from being this like vivacious, life-loving, hugging, you know, how you know me, to this complete just loss of interest in everything around me, holidays, vacations, my partner, everything. And it was really disturbing. And when I started looking into what was wrong, you know, I was like, do I need to be institutional? Like, what's happened? Like, what all of a sudden snapped that I went from being all those things to this completely other human? And is it my job? Is it my company? Is it my work? Is it a situation? Is it my partnership? Like, what is it? And when I finally called my doctor, and thank God I have a good one, and said, I'm losing it. Like, I need help. Like, I need an SSRI. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm afraid I'm going to harm myself. I've never felt this way before. I don't know what to do. And he said, Kacy, I hear you. And I see you. And I want you to take a deep breath. And he started chuckling. And he said, this is perimenopause. And I was like, who are you telling that this is, I am 44, my friend. Like, no, right? Like, it was like that reaction of like, what place? Listen, mister.
Like, boy, bye. I'm going to tell you something, okay?
Yeah. Right? And he's like, but I'm going to give you the prescription. He's like, try it. Let's see how it goes. You know, if you start feeling other symptoms, we will reevaluate, but let's start here. And so I started taking Lexapro, and within literally 2 days, my life changed. And I was not 100% myself. There were still things going on, but I could at least separate like the noise in my brain that was making me so uncomfortable, like feeling like I was coming out of my skin. And then, you know, I went on for about 2 years, and then the hot flashes, the night sweats, and like, we're not going to play around. I'm not saying this to scare you. But like hot flash, no, pish posh, nuclear meltdown, like night sweat every 20 minutes, being awakened. And when they come with panic. And so you literally feel like you're sweating through your sheets. And at the same time, you know, your partner comes to snuggle you and you're like, oh, you know, because you're having panic, and it's awful. And so I ended up going back to him. I was a good candidate for hormone therapy. I'm on it. That also resolved a lot of my symptoms. Now I still take supplementation, and I exercise, and I meditate, and I obviously get my breast cancer screenings every year. I just got my mammogram today. Like, I do all the things in addition to taking medicine to help me. But all I could think, Amy, was if this is my experience with all this education, a family where it was comfortable to talk about these things, and living in like right outside of Boston, literally the best place for healthcare in the world. If I was struggling and I was subject to Google search for my information, what is everybody else doing out there? Like, how is somebody in the middle of Alabama, you know, not to pick on Alabama, but like, how is somebody in the middle of a rural town in Alabama with only a couple doctors going to get this information? And how are they going to get it in a way that's streamlined and accessible so they can take it to their qualified healthcare provider? Because I am also not one. And then have a discussion, but at least have the information to have that discussion. And that's where the Fuschia Tent came from. It was really a goal to create clarity, simplicity, access, and support for all. And that's what I'm working on. That's what lights me up all day, every day. And who doesn't love fuchsia? It's like vibrant and like amazing.
Mine's purple. Everything on Luck the Magic is purple. So what I love so much about this is something that I talk a lot about on the show is the sheer lack of research and knowledge about women's bodies, knowing that just in 1993 was when we started researching women's bodies. 1993, it feels like just yesterday we started looking into this stuff about like, what does it mean to have a uterus, and also vulva versus vagina. And oh, by the way, there's this new, I know we're getting aside from menopause and I'll come back to it, but I'm on this like hot track right now about clitoral adhesion, this condition that we just found out about. The same way that like a foreskin on a penis can adhere, same thing with a clitoris. And when we talk about or find out that so many women have trouble orgasming, could that be the connection that we just were today years old that we found out about it? So I share all this because it can get really easy to get upset and frantic and pissed, frankly, about the lack of knowledge and understanding. And I breathe. And I know, and I trust that we're all out here learning and sharing, and women like you are at the forefront of making sure me at 42, who it's around the corner, it's coming, she's coming. At times I think she's here, but I don't know.
She might be.
She might be. Women like you are the ones that are helping us get through the pissed and to the side. Well, and you tell me if that's true. To the point where like we are learning, we're sharing and saying not one experience is going to look like the other, but as much as we share, we can say, oh, that really unusual thing that happens to you for an hour on X day of the month, that happened to me too.
It is. It really was not a mandate, right? There wasn't a federal mandate that women were included in studies, a clinical trial, until 1993. But we know that, there were obviously experiments taking place on people against their will, which is beyond disgusting. So, but when it comes to women's health, we were treated like little men. And to some extent, we still are. When there are so many drugs that are approved that were approved years and years before women were studied. And so you're getting a dose for a smaller weight, smaller size man. And at the same time, what's so fascinating for me about everything is the fact that we deliver babies. Like, we have the equipment to do something that they can't do. And it's not a them versus us thing. It's just a, how do we not look at this and go, we might need to explore this totally different endocrine system. Like, just because it has the same players, they work differently, right? And, but at the same time, I mean, we don't even talk about andropause or male menopause. Like, we don't talk about that either. It's like, because that's like a lack of virility. So all of these conditions, and they're neither one of them are conditions, all of these cycles of life are taboo because they're tied up in ageism and they're tied up in sexism. And, especially in the workplace where we've spent all these years fighting for equity, right? Like, fighting to have seats in all of the boardrooms, fighting to be on the table. Well, what woman gets there and wants to be like, I'm sorry, I have to excuse myself, I'm having a hot flash. Or, you know what, it'd be better if I'm not in this meeting today and I'm work from home because I'm a hair trigger because I haven't slept in 17 days, right? Like, what we need is workplaces to say, what are the things that we need to be thinking about? Not because women are inferior and because they have all of these problems that men don't have, but women are different. And so knowing that they create more diverse, better conversations, more robust workplaces, more empathy, more all of these things, how do we accommodate this cyclic process that happens to 51% of the population and not make it an accommodation? This is not an accommodation. An accommodation is for something, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's for something that is unique to an individual. This is not unique. Again, 51% of the population will go through this. They may go through it medically because they have a hysterectomy or process. They may go through it naturally, right? But it's a fact of life. So why are we not building work around it?
I dream of a day because of free will. I am not suggesting everyone wants to talk about it all the time. Yes. You and I could sit and talk about all of the things all day long and have no barriers or boundaries. Yes. And I dream of a day where, let's say, two humans could be at work and being like, how are your hot flashes? Oh, I had a kind of a rough night. How's your ED going? Oh, you know what? It's been better lately. Do you know what I'm saying? Is that completely wild?
I don't know why health is such a stigmatized topic. Like I was literally in this local coffee shop right before a nail appointment, maybe like 5 weeks ago. I was just about to launch the Fuschia Tent. And there are these two women in their, Lululemon pants with their matchas, which I'm not mocking because I have one sitting right next to me. If you could all see me, I'm sipping on my matcha. And they're whispering to each other. Like there's nobody in this place but like me and the woman at the cash register and like two people in the far corner. And they're whispering about their menopause and the fact that they have a loss of interest in sex, a loss of interest in everything. Like they just don't feel like themselves. And I walked over to them and I just was like, hi, I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I'm about to launch a business in this space. And I really think it's okay if you talk louder. They were so embarrassed. And then they were like excited to talk to me about it. But like, they were like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I was like, what? Why do we apologize? Why do we apologize for talking about things that are normal to us and are part of our lived experience? Why should we have to apologize? We should not. And I'm going to say that all day.
Yes, as you say that, I laugh because while you sip your matcha, I love that you have that. I've never tried it actually, so now you're inspiring me to try it. What I'll always offer is like to any human, if you don't feel good, do you need a snack? Do you need a nap? Do you need a poop?
Yeah.
One of those things could exponentially help your experience in this moment.
This is true. Or water.
I love what you're creating because it feels like, are your events for Fuschia Tent only in Boston or are you going to be traveling?
Oh, no, it's a virtual community and the website is completely free. So all the information, that people would need to access to take with them, not everything on the planet, but, I've aggregated a lot of the resources for free for people. I did over 500 hours of research and like culling everything together into these great PDFs you can take with you when you go to your medical visits, whether that be with, a naturopath or MD, functional doctor, nurse practitioner, PA, whoever. They're going to help. But then there's the community, and the community is virtual. And it is in Mighty Network. So if people are familiar with kind of a Mighty Network community, it's a great community where you kind of like circle up with people. And there's a great 14-day free trial in there. So you can come see what the community is all about. And then I'm also going to be doing live events. They probably won't kick off until like the October timeframe, just because, getting these two businesses in order has been, whew. And I just sold my house and I don't have a house. I got to get a house too, or at least rent something. But once I get all of that under my belt, yeah, I will be doing events and I will go around. But the mainstay is virtual connection because there are tons of people who do amazing live events and I will do some, but none of us have time to go to all of the live events. We have to pick and choose, right? That's great. Community is for everybody in person. And I wanted to create something that people could go to virtually. It didn't matter where they were. They could get group coaching. They could get expert webinars. They could get a happy hour mocktail or cocktail. We don't care, with a bespoke cocktail. There's Ask Me Anything sessions where I can take information back to experts for people if I don't have it. And just all this great opportunity for connection for people without having to leave their homes. Because I'm an introvert, sister. Like I am an extroverted introvert. I look to everybody. They're like, you love to speak. You're so personable. And I'm like, and then I go home and I lie down for 3 days.
Right.
Like I go to Valentine's Day. I landed when I came home and I was like, no one talked to me for like 2 days. I need 2 days in a hole to get my energy back. And then I'm back,
Sister, same. And mine's like very tied into my cycle as well. There are days where I'm an ambivert. Probably everyone is to some extent. You both. We're not just one thing. I have a sign on my wall that says I'm an indoor cat. So knowing that I'm pre-perimenopause, can I join as well?
Yeah,
Okay.
of course. Oh my
'Cause,
gosh,
like,
that's what it's for. There's
okay,
a whole millennial pause movement they're calling it, or
well,
millennial pause. So here's the rule of when it starts. And this was something that I had to learn. I had a misnomer on it, right? So the way we look at menopause, right, is peri is everything up until, and that doesn't mean like from when you're 5 years old. That means like once your perimenopause starts, which is typically 4 to 10 years before your menopause, which a lot of people don't know. Once you go 365 days with no period, that one day, that 366 day, that is menopause. And then guess what, sister? You're postmenopausal. And that's what's really interesting about this is we don't even have the right understanding of the terminology to understand what's happening in our bodies. So if you look at that and you think about the fact that the average age of menopause in this country, the United States, is 51 years of age. Minus 10 is 41 years of age. That's the average age, right? So that means if you go into menopause at 48, your peri probably started at 38. And the other really interesting thing that I learned about this space is that women who have had children tend to go through menopause slightly later if they go through naturally than women who haven't. And if you think about it, the reason scientifically, at least this is what I learned, is that we all know we're born with a finite number of eggs, and each month as we cycle, eggs release, and it's not one, there's multiple, right? Until we end up going through menopause. And if you've never had a child, you've never gone 9 to 10 months with no period, right? And so, or with no ovulation. There's a lot to learn, right? Like, and there's so much I don't know. I literally learn every time I go to a conference, I read a clinical periodical, but we ourselves don't even have the right language around peri, meno, and post.
I'm gearing up. I still love my natural, beautiful biological function of my monthly cycle. Again, a lot of what I do and feel into with my clients is how, as women especially, we can judge our bodies so hard. Like I had debilitating cramps when I was a late bloomer, as it were. I started when I was 16, my first period. And my cramps, it was almost like my body was building up and it was like, whoa. So it can cause pain, and there's a lot of judgment living in our second chakra that we might not even know of that could be still causing us something physically even after menopause. So I do a lot of work within the womb space specifically to address the energies that we've experienced our entire life cycles. You have this amazing post that like gives a lot of visceral meaning to what we've been talking about. I want to read it just from a couple of days ago. Coping with menopause in the workplace is both brutal and critical. Until you lived through a hot flash, trust me, you have no idea what it's like. Hot flashes aren't just about being warm. They're like burning up from the inside out, and they often come with a side of panic attack. Night sweats aren't about a gentle glistening of the brow. Think sweating through sheets, which makes it so miserable that we often sleep for 20-minute increments if we're lucky. None of these symptoms are a choice. They're part of what it means to be humans with the equipment and hormones to bring a new life into the world. And not only do most of us need to work through this transition, we want to work. Kacy, this really struck home with me because oftentimes someone's prime, I guess, let's say, and throughout their lifetime, it's like once you hit a certain age, it's not just about not giving any fucks. It's like you embrace your true nature of your unique, brilliant identity. And if you have a uterus, oh, by the way, menopause is coming. So it's like you feel the best, like soul-wise, and then you're smacked with something. How do you feel about some of these things coming up in the workplace, like menstrual days or menopause days? And what does true support actually look like? We've touched on it a little bit, but tell us more if you wouldn't mind.
So Wanda Sykes, the comedian, has been known to say if men had a hot flash, they would burn out the sun, right? Like that's how bad it is. And I had no empathy when I was younger in the work. I didn't know. Like that is why I'm so vocal about it now, not because I'm like, shame on, you for not being nice to women in their peak performance years. They're like, come, but to say like, listen, I was a real a-hole. Like I wasn't empathetic. I didn't know. And nobody corrected us, right? Like we didn't know that the women that were, in their peak performance years that were our bosses that were like stressed out and seemingly erratic were going through this. We were just like, what's wrong with them, right? And now then you go through it and you're like, oh, I'm a horrible person and I will repent by having the worst menopause ever. But listen, I think it's really important that we make it clear that this is not a gentle transition for 80% of us. 20% of people might have no symptoms. That doesn't mean their bodies aren't affected by the transition. It just means that they won't have bad manifestation of symptoms. The rest of us have varying degrees. And if you know one woman's menopause, you know one woman's menopause. They are all different. They never look the same. And so it is hard to talk about, but there are certain shared experiences, which is why I think we get so pigeonholed into talking about hot flashes and night sweats, as opposed to talking about joint pain and frozen shoulder and what happens to your feet, which wholly plantar fasciitis and wholly toe joint aches and all kinds of weird things that we all think are like, oh, it's like I'm falling apart because I'm aging. And it's like, no, your hormones are fluctuating wildly and your body and brain don't like it. And you're having all of these symptoms as a manifestation of that. So I think what workplace support looks like is a couple things. One, it's education. I think that in order to properly create workplaces that are welcoming, safe, and supportive for women in their peak performance years going through this transition, we need to, all of us, understand what's actually happening and why it's happening, right? And talk about it. There needs to be education. I think quiet rooms and fans and AC, it's all great, right? Like it's all nice. But what's better than a quiet room is not making someone come in on days when they feel like they're going to hurt their career, right? I wrote a blog post. You know, I talk about the ways to work through your menopausal transition. And one of them is don't be a workplace hero. If you are feeling at your worst, right? If you're me on that couch and you haven't slept in 8 days, you need to have a conversation. And no, should it be incumbent upon you to have to go to somebody and start the conversation? No, but like, let's be real. That's where we are. You don't have to get into gory details. You can simply say to your leader, listen, for various reasons, I have not slept in 10 days and I am doing everything I can to nurse my emotional state, but my ability to regulate isn't great today. And I really don't want to put myself in a position where I'm going to be combative or I'm going to have that kind of opportunity to make a mistake. Now, sure, you can't always do it. And sometimes you snap. We all do. Men do. Everybody does. That's what an apology is for, right? Like there's no excuse for being a jerk in the workplace. But if you know you're not at your best, we need to stop being like that person when it's like snowing. I don't know if you ever were this person, but I know you live in like a cold climate. Like there was this one day when I was like, it was like horrible and they should not have gone in. And I was like, no, I need to show it. I'm going into work. And I almost got in a car accident. And I was like, never again. Never again, Mother Nature, will I be a workplace hero, right? Like, nope, I will mind my surroundings, you, my body. It's just not worth it. And so I think the counterpoint to that is leaders need to get comfortable with the dialogue, right? So yes, we have this accountability part where we need to ask for what we need, right? But then the flip side of that is leaders need to be having conversations that sound like, hey, Amy, tell me what support from me looks like for you. Hey, Amy, how's your workload right now? I've noticed that you seem a little bit ill at ease the last couple of days. Is everything okay? Is there something I can offer you, right? It's not, let me solve it for you. Like, let me be your doctor. Let me explain menopause. Like, we're not asking for leaders to be experts in mental health, menopause, andropause, child rearing, like teenage issues, divorce. Like, no, we're saying you need to ask, you need to reframe, and you need to provide resources. Companies have them. You have now at least heard your person and addressed them, and they feel like they have some level of safety, right? And so I think that's really what it's going to take to change workplaces, and people that are willing, like myself. That doesn't make me better. I'm in a unique position, right? Like, I'm facing ageism and sexism. I'm not facing racism, right? So I understand why it makes sense for me to come forward and open my big yap, because I'm got two things that I'm facing and not three, four, five, like some other people might, right? And so we need to, those of us that are comfortable, talk about this and make it okay, so that those people who are constantly having to explain everything else don't have to. Like, not that menopause for me is the same as Black and brown women. It's not. There are differences in our bodies, and there are many people who are way more versed in talking about that than I am. That is still an area of learning for me. And I am not an expert, and I am not a doctor on all ways of treating menopause and what happens to every single unique woman's body. But I am going to speak about what menopause is like for me and what it's like for the women I know. And I am going to create a space where every woman can speak, and where those women who have a different lived experience than me can tell me what their menopause was like. But we all get together and talk about it, right? There are similarities and there are going to be differences. And in sharing those stories, we start to kind of weave a quilt together of this experience of what it means to be a woman, and a woman in powerful positions in her peak performance years. We haven't even scratched the surface, right? Because individuals who are non-binary or who are trans, that go through transition, if you're taking hormones to transition, you may go through menopausal symptoms at 20. Mm-hmm. And so there's all of these fields and layers to this conversation that are so critical. And that doesn't mean that I'm the right one to have them, but it means that I have a responsibility to facilitate and learn as much as I possibly can, so I can create spaces where all people that are going through this transition feel included.
You're the creator of the tent to bring in those people that are maybe the experts in those other places too.
That's right.
Cool. So I can't wait to join the tent. I'm going to be there. As we start to wind down, if there are people in charge, from my perspective, there's a lot of work I do with workplace psychological safety overall. And what I find to be a sticking point in that space specifically are the people that created, benefited, and perpetuated one of the systems that was outdated from over 100 years ago. So one of the four or many that I spoke about earlier. Some of those people are literally not willing to even entertain a conversation about what could be supportive for the different segments of humanity, whether it be menopause or even menstruation or transition, or they're not even willing to entertain the conversation. Do you talk to those people? For me, my sacred rage would come beautifully up and fire out of my mouth.
Listen, I think, having worked in corporate spaces for 20 plus years, and I know you've done the same, especially in my latest roles in well-being, there are a lot of people for whom it doesn't feel like these conversations belong in the workplace, right? They want to go back to the good old days, and I say that in quotation, where politics, religion, race, ethnicity, women's health, men's health, pregnancy, where none of it was talked about. And we all walked around with one identity at home and another identity at work. And then everybody went out to the bar and had drinks because we like to promote alcohol, because that's okay. And then, you come back the next day and everything's cleaned up, and it doesn't matter if your dog or cat just died, or you miscarried a child, or your baby's going through transition, or you have a divorce. You're just supposed to cut it out and go to work, right? And to those people, when I'm in conversation with them, my sacred rage stays under wraps, because there is no point in those moments to using it. I feel like it perpetuates a stereotype of hysterical woman. Let's go back there, right? hysteria, uterus, the same word, right? There's a reason we're called hysterical because we have uteruses. I won't be a party to that. So I tend to appeal with data. I appeal with what is true of absenteeism for women during this cycle of their lives, or humans that have uteruses as they go through the cycle, this cycle of their life. Same with menstruation. I come with the number of workplace conflicts that take place during this period of time, or women who opt out of corporations at this time in their life when they are their smartest, bravest, wisest, most empathetic. And I have conversations from that place because both things are true. My rage is real, right? My activist, my inner activist, she's real.
Yeah.
And these things do disappoint me deeply. But I also have learned over time that we as people operate differently, right? Like even my partner and I, like data schmata, like if I feel it and you feel it and you tell me you feel it, you felt it and it's real, right? Like end of story, it happened. You know, that is how you're feeling, and I'm honoring that. My partner is very data driven, right? Like not in a gaslighting crappy way, right? But like oh honey, if you're feeling that way, we need to go to the doctor. Someone needs to tell you, we need to check it out. And I'm like, no. My body, as my friend Erin Etas says, my body, my truth. Like I know my body than any medical professional on the planet. That doesn't mean I know more about medicine. That doesn't mean I know more about your body or anyone else's body, but my body is the thing that I live in. It's my meat suit, right? And so I think, you know, for those who have not come around yet, or who don't have space for this conversation, there will be a reckoning to come. I mean, companies are going to break up, and they are already doing it, into wildly culture driven choices. And for people that are highly skilled and super bright and the top talent, they're going to have a choice of what culture they want to play in. And most people in the smarter than my Gen X generation are not putting up with the garbage that we put up with anymore. And so, you know, I do think that there is going to be that reckoning, but I also think that, you know, there's intergenerational learning to be had across the board. And when we open ourselves up to, there's wisdom from Gen X and boomers, there's knowledge and different perspectives from millennial and Z. And if we share them, we're all better. We come into a world where all women now and men now know what menopause is like, what some of these life transitions are like, and have empathy for their coworkers that are different as they kind of go through this transition. So that's my goal, is to make sure that every woman and every man knows what this is like, so that we have empathy from a lived experience, right?
Yeah, I'll never force my agenda or my beliefs onto someone, but I will say, come with me or get out of the way. That's really kind of my vibe, because here's the thing, like if someone can't hear what I'm trying to change for the betterment of a larger mass of humanity, if you can't hear me, it's not my job to make you hear me. And
Totally.
I understand too, and have awareness around the fact that there's something about this change or this new way of doing things or different way of doing things that you don't feel safe in, and that's your work, not mine. And we can talk about coaching, sure, but I'm not going to sit there and like try to, you know, to run myself into the ground. And then like, I think the last thing I would say about that is, absolutely to your point, imagine if we just stopped doing business today around the world, just stopped. And maybe it does need to come crashing down to the ground, but every economy, everything we ever knew would come crashing down. That's where I like what you said about, I would love an intergenerational conversation about like, hey, here's how we created the industrial age 100 years ago, and here's why we set up things the way we did. Gen Z and millennials, like, what do you think? What might work for you? How could we do it differently? And then from both sides too, everybody can like get real pissed off at each other, and then move through to be like, how does this work for the big four, meaning Z, millennial, X, boomer, all in the workplace right now? How do we make this work together? Like, that's what I would like to see at some point. And I personally won't go back in until that conversation's had. So, Kacy, where do we find you?
Oh my goodness. I have way too many handles these days and I don't like it. But You can find all the great information you ever wanted or needed to know if you're perimenopausal, menopausal, or postmenopausal at thefuschia.tent.com. If you're looking for consulting or you're looking for any sort of organizational psychology work being done in your business, Kacy Fleming Consulting. LinkedIn is Kasing Act. I used to sing and act. There's something we didn't talk about today. KASINGACT. And to find me on Instagram, it's KCA underscore Kacy, the letters, KCA letters underscore Fleming or the Fuschia Tent.
Can you sing your closing remarks?
Can I sing them or will I? I could, but that would be a paid conversation because I would have to live with what I sang. So no, I am not going to do that, but I love you.
I love you too. Okay, closing remarks the way you would like to deliver them.
No, I mean, I'm so grateful for this conversation. Listen, I think you're 100% right. This is a conversation of intergenerational education, and I am just here to, really bring out that dialogue around this part of the journey. I've got a lot of work around well-being, and I'm always here for that discussion. And there are huge differences in the data behind what the four main generations feel about mental health and well-being and isolation and loneliness. And I'm always here for that conversation. But my deepest goal, my deepest mission is twofold. Is one, really, and I said this at the top, but I mean it's why I did what I did, is to provide clarity, simplicity, support, and access for all, and all means all, and to highlight female founders in the menopause space. Those are the two guideposts of the Fuschia Tent. When I was starting the business, I didn't know what it was going to be. I knew what the name was, like a good marketer, before I knew anything that I was going to do. And I knew like a big goal, that number one goal. But when I went in and kind of looked at everything out there and saw how many women have done remarkable things in the space, it made no sense for me to create another product. It was like, let me just make sure I highlight all of them and get everybody in one place and community. So I'm so grateful to be here with you. And I encourage everybody, if you're not educated about your own body or your colleague's body, I don't mean that in a creepy way, or your partner or anything, go to the Fuschia Tent, get educated, come ask me questions, DM me. If I don't know the answer, I'll get a doctor to provide them or some kind of medical professional that I am not. And I'm just so happy to be here.
Thank you, Kacy.
Thank you, Amy.